John Carter was the very epitome of a successful man, well-known doctor from Hartford, married to Emily Davis, bright and beautiful woman. From the outside, everything was in perfect condition for both of them to live together happily. Inside, however, the bond was decaying into pieces. Tired of routine and having a desire for something more in life, Emily felt nailed up in a loveless marriage that was secure but devoid of passion. And into her life entered David Miller, all charm, mystery, and aglow with some contagious energy, where he was everything lacking in the marriage. Traction between them was immediate ballooning, and soon both were ensnared in a secret affair. What rose between them was passionate and forbidden, further enhancing their urgent desire to be together. John, however, did not know about his wife's adultery. Confident in his marriage, he never suspected that Emily was having affairs. Blinded by the feeling of love for her, he failed to see the signs that something was wrong. The routine of quiet dinners and superficial conversations masked the storm brewing underneath. The relationship among John, Emily, and David turned into an ill-fated game of passion, combined with guilt and lies. Every time they would secretly meet, it would be a moment of passion, but it was also a heavy burden that weighed upon them. Guilt was gnawing her inside, and doubt tortured David by haunting him with questions about how much he really loved her. Her life of duplicity was no longer manageable. The lies, so easy and inconsequential at first, now ate into her from inside. Each lie took her farther away from John. It was now frightening to imagine the day when he might discover her infidelity. Every meeting with David made her feel more torn between the love she had for him and the loyalty she owed to her husband. The tension rose from day to day. The air was increasingly unstable. The next minute, the very fragile edifice that held everything together could topple over and get swept away in completely unforeseen events. Passion united them, became an extraordinarily powerful force, dangerous, and ready to lead into ruin. The discovery of the affair was only a matter of time. The question that lingered was, who would be the first victim of this unchecked passion? The answer to that question would result in a violent confrontation, which would change the lives of all those involved forever. It would be succeeded by a night of horror, marked with violence and death, shocking the quiet town of Hartford. This was all about to come crashing down around Emily and David's very fragile web of lies. With each clandestine tryst, the sensation that they were being watched over grew. Paranoia crept into both of their hearts and nourished the fear of capture. John was now wary, having begun the investigation of his wife's life. Emails, text messages, and phone calls were all meticulously scrutinized. Clues were sought in unimaginable places, uncovering a part of Emily he had never known existed. That night of discovery was one of bitter rows between the lovers. The soft, loving words now cut as sharp as knives and did much to shred that fragile relationship. The truth finally broke over John like an avalanche, and evidence of what all along he suspected. The blow was too much to bear. The pain engulfed every other feeling. Rage took his eyes off everything else. John's reaction was violent. With uncontrollable fury, he started to confront Emily with questions. The argument kept rising higher and higher with each passing moment. The tension was tangible. The house, once a haven of peace, became a battlefield. The last straw was David's being there that night. But the sight of the man who had stolen his wife drove John to madness. A huge rage burned in his head. He wanted nothing but revenge. Another vicious fight ensued, and the house was reduced to a scene of destruction. The neighbors' call to the police, startled by screams from that side, ended in a horror show. There was John in a state of shock, sitting on the floor with his face full of blood. Emily was lying unconscious, while David was nowhere to be found. The house itself was in disarray and littered with furniture. The evidence found at the crime scene indicated that there had been a violent struggle. An investigation was started by the police as to David's whereabouts and explanation for what had occurred. The search for the man who fled became the first priority, and the city of Hartford was put on high alert. Every hour the police were going deeper into the investigation, and the pieces began to fall into place. The sealed-off Carter home increased the gravity of the police investigation. Every inch of the location was meticulously looked at, in hope of finding that elusive clue, which would lead them to the fugitive. The evidences were being collected by the forensic team. Fingerprints, hair strands, and bloodstains were collected and sent for analysis. But the thing they still hadn't found was the murder weapon. The police scrutinized the house and the area for any object that could have possibly been used to commit the act. So far, nothing had come to light. The investigators felt the murder weapon was going to provide a way to trace the killer. Provided a weapon was found, it could trace the weapon, and hence the killer, by identifying the caliber and type of ammunition that the killer used. The search for the weapon became stronger, and each clue, however insignificant it seemed, was probed meticulously. Theories on the murder weapon started to multiply. Some of the investigators believed that the murder weapon might have been a firearm. Some believed it might have been a bladed weapon, and it might also have been thrown somewhere near the location of the accident. The haste to find that weapon mounted day by day. Public opinion was wanting results, and the investigators did feel the heat to wrap up the case as soon as possible. With each new lead came new hope, but the frustration of not finding the weapon was there. While the police were busy gathering evidence at the crime scene, rumors regarding the case were already rife throughout town. The people were shocked at the love triangle and murder case. Thinking of what could have been the causes of the murder, there was speculation on the media, and theories were flying everywhere, therefore putting added pressure on the people involved in the case. As the days went by, such hope of finding the murder weapon slackened. The search did not stop. Retrieving the weapon meant putting together the pieces of the puzzle and ultimately catching the murderer. So the investigators knew it, and the finding of the weapon would turn the table of the investigation and unravel a spurt of surprising revelation. It was very shocking the way the violence was represented at the Carter House crime scene. The living room, once a cozy place, turned into a battlefield. Shattered furniture, scattered blood spots on the floor, personal things everywhere gave a sense of chaos and destruction. Forensic investigators worked tirelessly, documenting each phase of the crime scene. The investigators captured in photographs and video everything, however minor it might turn out to be. Fingerprints found on furniture and walls were highly collected to help identify those involved in the fight. The blood stains spreading on the floor revealed the brutality of the struggle. Experts in crime scenes use luminol to reveal bloodstains invisible to the naked eye, tracing out the fight. The impact points. Now, the analysis of bloodstains would turn out to be rather important in the reconstruction of the dynamics according to the crime, and particularly in establishing the sequence of events. The search for physical evidence resumed. Investigators literally left no stone unturned in the house, rolling up carpets, examining all furniture and even the walls, hoping to turn up some clue that may lead to the murder weapon. The crime scene investigation team worked during the whole time in the presence of watching neighbors who were curious and in shock. News about the murder had quickly spread through the neighborhood, and everybody spoke about that case. Tranquility on that street was gone. Fear took the place of the residents. Press was also locally present to get any exclusive details about it. Reporters and photographers crowded at the Carter House front door, trying to pick up any detail which could be used in their report. This media pressure was extreme. The Carter House crime scene was a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Any information, no matter how unimportant it may seem, had proved to be the key to the murder. The investigation had hardly begun. There were far more questions to be answered than solved. Killer's name was unknown, and the murder weapon was yet to be found. The police worked relentlessly to solve the mystery and find answers for this community in dire need of them. The search for the murderer of Emily Carter had grown with every passing day. The Hartford police were working all day and night to find the person who had committed this heinous crime. Every clue, no matter how small, was being carefully analyzed by the detectives. Investigators questioned friends, family members, colleagues of the victims, anyone who might yield information about the case. A peaceful life, like that of John Carter, was now placed under thorough scrutiny. His habits, relationships, and past were in plain view. Pressure mounted upon the police from the media. Day after day, the media was releasing more and more information about the case to a curious, anxious public. The city of Hartford had been stunned, and the search for the killer was the headlines of all the newspapers and on every TV screen. Detectives started working day and night. Evidence that was collected from the scene of the crime was under scrutiny. Fingerprints found on the furniture and walls matched with those of everyone involved in the case. The bloodstains were being examined in the laboratory to determine the blood type and DNA of both the victim and the attacker. The team of investigators also went through the telephone calls and messages exchanged by the persons concerned. They looked for a conversation that could lead them to the motive behind the crime or to a potential accomplice. Social media accounts were equally trawled in the hope of finding some posts that would provide a clue. While the police investigation was developing, several rumors were surrounding it in the town. People in circulation believed John Carter to be the main suspect, while others spoke about David Miller as the perpetrator. But the truth lay buried somewhere under it all. The investigation was at a precarious moment. The evidence was under close scrutiny, and interviews of all the witnesses were about to be complete. Police were closer to solving the mystery of Emily Carter's murder than ever before. But the truth may turn out to be more astounding than one could fathom. In revealing who the killer was, the Hartford community would be shaken to its core, and thus this tale of passion, betrayal, and death would come to an end. The atmosphere was tense at the Hartford police station. For weeks, detectives had pressed relentlessly to bring closure to the murder of Emily Carter. Now they finally had that missing piece to tie everything together. Evidence from the scene of crime, statements from eyewitnesses, and laboratory tests, the investigation kept pointing back to one person. But the biggest shock was the identity of the killer. The one whom none had suspected was the perpetrator of this heinous crime. Truth thus came to blow off all those theories and speculations which were making rounds for the past few days. The community of Hartford, already reeling from the crime, felt betrayed and deceived. Killer was arrested in a very secretive way to avoid crowd sensitization by the police. After that, the suspect was taken to the station for questioning by the detective. During the interrogation, he confessed to the crime, giving reasons that led him to do such a heinous act. The confession revealed a much more sinister tale than anyone could have ever thought possible. Nobody could ever have imagined the real truth about the relationships that existed between the victims and the killer. Passion, envy, and revenge formed a twisted plot that stirred the shock of all who came to know about it. News of the killer's arrest spread fast, and Hartford was suddenly flushed with a sea of emotion. A tragic love triangle that ended in murder was there, topping every story on social media and in newspapers. The community at large could barely understand how such a heinous crime could have been done by an individual who turned out to be apparently so ordinary. The trial of the killer was much anticipated. People in Hartford followed every detail of the proceedings, all wishing to see justice done. The prosecution's case was overwhelming, though there was nothing the accused could do but plead guilty to their crime. With the conviction of the killer, the murder case of Emily Carter seemed to reach its ending. Yet, the scars created by that crime would never heal. It would take many years for the Hartford community to be free from shock. That tragic love story reminded everybody that things are not always they seem to be, and it is the presence of violence which is always there in everyone's life. This, however, was not the ending for Emily Carter. Further investigation into this cruel crime showed multiple failures in the criminal justice system that had let a murderer stay free for so many years. New laws were proposed to avoid such crimes and guarantee public safety. Although tragic, the death of Emily Carter in some ways proved to be a blessing to society, as it opened people's eyes to reporting any forms of violence and seeking help if need be. The conviction of Emily Carter's killer really didn't erase the hurt and suffering inflicted by the heinous crime. Her family and friends continued wrestling with the loss in search of justice and closure. Meanwhile, Hartford struggled to pick up life from the shock of tragedy. Trial signaled the end of the police investigation. However, its echoes resounded back to the crime. Emily Carter's story turned into an emblematic case, and she came to stand for the dangers of domestic abuse and betrayal. The media followed the case at every turn and looked into the many different aspects of it. There were books and documentaries made that detailed the lives of Emily Carter and everyone involved, in a macabre sense, public fascination. Slowly, over time, Hartford came out of the shock. But the memory of Emily Carter would not easily go away. A memorial was established in her memory at a quiet, tree-lined corner, where people could come and pay tributes to remember the event that had changed their community forever. Her family, with the help of the community, began a foundation in her memory to help other victims of domestic abuse. The foundation gives psychological, legal, and financial aid to women in situations like the one Emily found herself in. The story of Emily Carter completely changed the perception in society, making people realize that everything, anything, with regards to violence, had to be reported. Many women who were afraid of reporting their abusers came out to seek help after the case, as the level of awareness increased. The man who murdered Emily Carter spent his remaining life in prison, serving the crime he had committed. The case proved to be a very good example among other criminals, proving justice would prevail for all. The story of Emily Carter epitomizes that domestic violence is very real and can happen to anybody, irrespective of their class or educational background. Improving the struggle against domestic violence has been a continuous process. However, the experience of Emily Carter shows us that after all, we can actually win this battle and have a world where most of the people will be safe.